Hello all and welcome to another video. In this video the 4080 Super is pitted against the usual contenders for this price range, the 4080 and the 7900 XTX, AMD's flagship. If you are interested on the system specs, check the description section of the video. Before each side-by-side comparison, I will show the game settings used for testing. You will see only the 4K side-by-side comparison in order to not make this video too long, and I will display the averages for the 4K and 1440p runs. Before we start, consider subscribing to the channel to help it grow, and drop a comment below to let me know if the current price for the 4080 Super is right. Let's not waste any more time and dive into the comparisons. In Horizon Zero Dawn, the 7900 XTX leads the pack with averages of 125 frames, while the 1% lows are the same for all three cards. At 1440p, the 4080 Super delivers better 1% lows than the other two cards. To be honest, a disappointing start for the 4080 Super, as the model I have seems to have lower in-game clocks than the 4080 that I'm using in the benchmarks. Let's see if it can redeem itself in other games. In Total War Pharaoh, the 4080 Super falls a bit behind the 7900 XTX when it comes to the averages, with 39.6 compared to 40.1, but leads with better 1% lows, 31.6 compared to 27.7 for the AMD card. At 1440p, both Nvidia cards lead the 7900 XTX with better averages and 1% lows. It seems that the 4080 Super not able to deliver a clear victory over the 4080 in this game. The lead that it has can be attributed to margin of error. Let's move to the next one. AMD dominates in The Last of Us Part 1 with averages of 67 and 1% lows around 59, while the 4080 Super managed 56.9 and 1% lows of 49.4, besting again the 4080 that delivered averages of 55.2 and 1% lows of almost 48. At 1440p, the 4080 Super manages to increase a bit the lead over the 4080, but it can't match the 7900 XTX as the AMD card keeps its lead. Let's move to another raster-only game. At 4K in Atomic Heart, the 4080 Super is close to the 7900 XTX, but falls short when it comes to the 1% lows as it stuttered more. The 7900 XTX leads the pack with averages of 95.4 and 1% lows of 81.3, while the 4080 Super averaged 94.7 with 63.6 1% lows. In Remnant 2 at 4K and 1440p, the 7900 XTX leads by quite a big margin. At 4K, the AMD flagship averaged 74.5 and delivered 1% lows of 64.2, which are higher than the averages of the 4080 Super and the 4080. The former leads the latter again by whopping 1 frame when it comes to the averages and 1% lows. At 1440p, the 4080 does a bit better though. I think that this game is designed around AMD hardware. To the next one. As expected, in Starfield, the 7900 XTX leads both Nvidia cards, but here the 4080 is the one that sits closer to the 7900 XTX. At 4K, the AMD card manages averages of 70.7 and 1% lows of 60.8, while the 4080 managed averages of 69.3 and 1% lows of 57.9, besting the 4080 Super by a bit more than 1 FPS. After driver and game updates, the Nvidia cards sit close to the 7900 XTX in performance. In Atlas Fallen at 4K, the 4080 Super leads the other two cards with averages of 112.3 and 1% lows of 91.3, while the AMD card manages averages of 109.5 but had the best 1% lows at 93.1. In this game, all cards perform more or less the same, as the difference can be attributed to margin of error. In Talos Principle 2, an Unreal Engine 5 game, we basically see all cars tied, with the 4080 Super enjoying a small win at 4K, at least when it comes to the averages, delivering 59.5, while the AMD car managed to achieve the best 1% lows value, with 44.5 compared to 43.6 for the 4080 Super. Keep in mind that this game is activating ray tracing when maxing it out. Path tracing brings all cards to their knees, but the Nvidia cards fare better. Looking at the 4K results in Alan Wake 2, the 4080 Super is tied with the 4080, delivering averages of 55 frames per second and 1% lows of 44, while the AMD card can barely average above 30, 31.2 to be more precise, but the 1% lows drop to 21 frames per second. The 1440p results don't change the balance, with both Nvidia cards delivering the same performance, a bit unexpected. The Nvidia cards are tied at 4K in F123, with the AMD card a bit further behind. Both the 4080 Super and the 4080 delivered averages of 88 and 1% lows of 77 frames, while the AMD card managed 80 and 63. At 1440p, the 4080 Super enjoys a small lead, but 2 frames per second is nothing to brag about. The 7900 XTX delivers good performance, but exhibits a bigger delta between the average and the 1% lows frame rate. The extra cores of the 4080 Super doesn't help to deliver a meaningful performance improvement over the 4080. In Jedi Survivor at 4K, the 4080 Super leads the pack, at least when looking at the averages, achieving averages of 50 and 1% lows of 37.7 frames, while the AMD card manages to achieve the best 1% lows, 38.2, and averages of 46.9. The same behavior can be observed at 1440p, with the 4080 Super having the better averages, while the 7900 XTX has the best 1% lows, though both Nvidia cards sit close to each other. From a performance standpoint, the 4080 Super fails to impress yet again. These results are with ray tracing enabled. In the latest Assassin's Creed game at 4K, the 7900 XTX is matched by the 4080 Super, delivering both 102 frames when it comes to the averages, but the Nvidia card has better 1% lows at around 68 compared to 46. Moving on to the 1440p results, the AMD card takes the lead yet again, at least when looking at the averages, with 163 compared to the 4080 Super's 161, but the latter delivers again better 1% lows, 92 compared to 65. In Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, both Nvidia cards are tied at 1440p and 4K. Looking at the 4K results, the AMD card manages averages of 59.8 and 1% lows of 41.1, while the 4080 Super had averages of 67.7 and 1% lows of 52.8. When looking at the 1440p results, the 4080 Super delivered 110.2 and 79.1 frames, while the 7900 XTX managed 92.8 and 65.7. In a played Tale Requiem using RT shadows at 4K, the 4080 Super takes the lead, with averages around 54 frames and 1% lows of 44. The 4080 falls a bit behind here, with averages of 51, but the 1% lows are a bit lower, and this is mainly due to some stuttering. At 1440p, both Nvidia cards deliver similar averages, being only separated by 1 frame, while the AMD card set at 78 and 45.5. This game looks pretty good, and to be honest, RT shadows doesn't bring much to the table, and the performance drop is quite substantial. Ratchet & Clank is a game that runs better on Nvidia hardware, and at 4K the 4080 Super enjoys a small lead over the 4080 and a substantial one over the 7900 XTX, with averages of 66.6 and 1% lows of 42.8, while the Radeon card managed 38.4 but dipped to 18.4 when it comes to the 1% lows. At 4K this game requires upscaling when maxing it out. In Resident Evil 4 at 4K, the 7900 XTX leads the pack, and this is with ray tracing enabled. It delivers 105.7 when it comes to the averages and 91.7 1% lows. The 4080 Super can be said that is slightly faster than the 4080, but the cards are within margin of error. The tables are turned when going down to 1440p, where the Nvidia cards lead the AMD card. In this game, you'll have a hard time in telling the Nvidia cards apart by looking only at the performance. In Lords of the Fallen 2, the Nvidia cards are tied at both resolutions, while the AMD card is a bit behind, but has good 1% low values, especially at 1440p, where it outpaces both the 4080 and the 4080 Super. This game is with ray tracing enabled, and the 7900 XTX does well here, at least in the area I'm running the benchmarks. In Cyberpunk 2077, the 4080 Super leads, and at 4K it did have a better 1% low value than the original 4080. As expected, we think the 4080 Super has a huge lead over the 7900 XTX, but to be honest, this game is built around Nvidia hardware, and at 4K a 4090 with upscaling is required for this game to pull over 60 FPS or enable frame gen on the 4080s, but this will reduce the responsiveness of the game. In Spider-Man Remaster, all three cards perform the same, even with ray tracing enabled. At 4K, the 7900 XTX had the best 1% lows, averaged from 3 runs with 65 compared to 60.5 managed by the 4080 Super. At 1440p, the 4080 Super takes the lead, although by a small margin. The 7900 XTX is matching the original 4080 in average performance with 106.9 frames, while the 4080 Super delivered on average 110.8. Returner is the last game that I checked, and at 4K with RT enabled, the 4080 Super managed to deliver averages of 63 frames, while the 7900 XTX hovered around 58, with the 1% lows seeing a bigger gap of 10 FPS between the two in favor of the Nvidia card. The 4080 Super had better 1% lows as well at 1440p, besting the original 4080 and the 7900 XTX again. In the 4K overall results, we can see that there are games that benefit one GPU architecture more than the other, as outlined on the screen. The ones where the Radeon card drops so much performance are the ones where the Nvidia card needs upscaling. As it can be seen, the 4080 Super doesn't change the balance by much. We still have games where the 7900 XTX does better. The 4080 Super does better when using ray tracing, as expected, but the 7900 XTX still performs admirably, and if priced correctly, it could be the better card, if energy is no concern. Now, when checking the overall averages, we see that the 7900 XTX is, on average, around 5.5% slower than the original 4080, while the 4080 Super is close to 2% faster. This is based on the 20 games tested. Keep in mind that these results are with ray tracing. When moving to the 1440p results, we see minor changes, but the dynamics are the same. The 4080 Super barely outperforms the 4080, while not matching the 7900 XTX, where the AMD card has an advantage over the original 4080. The 4080 Super is not able to differentiate itself from the original, at least from a performance standpoint. And there you go, this is how the 4080 Super performs compared to the 7900 XTX and the older 4080. To be honest, I don't think that this card can be called a Super based on the performance difference from the old one. I still think these GPUs are overpriced, but sales retail. Consider subscribing to the channel, as I will do a follow-up of my thoughts about the GIGABYTE WINDFORCE 4080 Super, have a look at the thermals, overclocking, and my general thoughts about the card. Drop a comment below and let me know what do you guys think of the Nvidia 40 Super release. If you like the video, hit the thumbs up button. See you in the next one.